In polite society, a daughter may be sacrificed to preserve a family's honor, but she must never admit she knows it. At 19, she understood perfectly. When her elder sister vanished days before the wedding, it was not grief that filled the house, it was calculation. And before the scandal could take root, her father made a decision. She would marry the Duke instead. The brutal one. The feared one. The man who had never once been described as kind. They did not ask whether she wished to marry him. They informed her. The carriage would leave at dawn. The wedding would proceed as scheduled. No one must suspect desperation. Her sister had fled in the night with a charming officer and a foolish belief in romance. But romance does not settle debts, nor does it silence gossip. So the younger daughter, the sensible one, would stand at the altar in her place. She had heard the stories of the Duke. That he dismissed servants without warning. That he spoke in Parliament only to end arguments. That no woman had remained in his favor for long. They called him brutal. Not because he shouted, but because he never raised his voice at all. When she was told she would marry him, she did not weep. She only asked one question. Does he know I am not the one he chose? Her father hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. The Duke knew. And he had agreed anyway. The morning of the wedding arrived cold and precise. The house bustled not with joy but urgency. Seamstresses adjusted lace. Servants avoided her eyes. Her mother prayed, not for happiness, but for survival of reputation. At 19, she had expected many futures. This was not one of them. As the carriage carried her toward the vast estate that would soon become her prison, or her refuge, she pressed her gloved hands together and made herself a promise. If she must be a substitute bride, she would not be a trembling one. If she must marry a beast, she would not arrive afraid. What she did not yet know was this: the Duke she had been warned about was not a monster, but a man who had mistaken fear for strength. And he had never met a woman who did not flinch. Until her. If you enjoy stories where duty turns into devotion, take a moment to like the video, and stay with me. This one begins with sacrifice. And it does not end the way anyone expected. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Is it late at night, when quiet stories feel safest, or early morning, before the world asks anything of you? Drop your city and the time in the comments. I will read everyone, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. The house had been in chaos for 3 days. Servants whispered in corners. Her mother's embroidery lay abandoned, threads tangled like her composure. Her father paced the study with the door closed, his voice rising and falling in jagged waves. Her sister was gone. Not dead. Not ill. Gone. Clarissa had vanished 2 nights before her wedding to the Duke, slipped away in darkness with a charming lieutenant and foolish dreams of love. She left behind her trousseau, her duty, and a scandal that would devour them all. Rosalind stood at her bedroom window, watching carriages arrive. Guests who had come for a wedding now came for gossip. They would smile with sharp teeth and ask pointed questions her mother could not answer. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Rosalind. Her father's voice, careful and worn. I need you in the study. She knew before she turned. Knew before she walked the corridor. Knew before she saw her parents' faces, her mother pale and tight-lipped, her father unable to meet her eyes. Rosalind. Her father cleared his throat. We find ourselves in a difficult position. She waited. Your sister's actions have placed this family in jeopardy. Financial obligations remain. The Duke's alliance is, he stopped. Started again. The wedding must proceed. Silence pressed against her ribs. Her mother's hands twisted in her lap. We have no other choice, darling. The debts. You want me to marry him. Rosalind's voice came out steady, calmer than she felt. Her father exhaled. The Duke has been informed of the substitution. He has agreed to accept the younger daughter in Clarissa's place. Substitution. The word hung in the air like smoke. And if I refuse? Her mother flinched. Her father met her gaze for the first time. Then we are ruined. Completely. Your mother, myself, you, we will have nothing. No home. No prospects. The scandal alone. Does he know? Rosalind interrupted quietly. Know what? That I am not the one he chose. Her father's jaw tightened. He knows. And he agreed anyway. He did. Rosalind turned back to the window. Below, another carriage arrived. More witnesses to their desperation. She had heard the stories about the Duke. Everyone had. They called him brutal. Not because he shouted, but because he never needed to. He spoke in Parliament only to end debates. He dismissed servants without warning. No woman had ever held his attention long. He was cold, exacting, and utterly without mercy. 7 years ago, his first engagement had ended when the woman fled rather than marry him. No one spoke of why. And now he would have Rosalind instead. The ceremony is tomorrow, her father said quietly. The guests are already here. We cannot delay. Tomorrow. She had one day to prepare for a life she had not chosen, with a man who terrified even battle-hardened lords. Rosalind. Her mother's voice cracked. Please. She closed her eyes, felt the weight of her family's survival settle across her shoulders like a cloak she had not asked to wear. When she turned back, her voice was calm. I will need my sister's wedding gown altered. Her mother sagged with relief. Her father nodded, already moving toward damage control. Neither asked if she was afraid. Perhaps they knew better. Or perhaps they simply could not bear the answer. That night, Rosalind sat alone in her room as seamstresses adjusted lace that had been made for someone else. She pressed her hands together and made herself a promise. If she must be a substitute bride, she would not be a trembling one. If she must marry a beast, she would not arrive afraid. The Duke had agreed to take her knowing she was second choice. Very well. She would meet him as herself, not as her sister's shadow. And if he expected fear, he would be disappointed. Jack Vanderbilt did not rage when he received the letter. He stood at the window of his study, watching rain lash against the glass, and felt nothing but cold calculation settle in his chest. The elder Miss Dunmore has departed. We humbly offer her sister in her stead. Humbly. As if this were a request and not a scramble to salvage their ruin. Your Grace. His secretary hovered near the door. Shall I send a response? Jack was silent for a long moment. Outside, the estate grounds stretched dark and formal beneath the storm, hedges trimmed to geometric precision, paths swept clean, not a single leaf out of place. He had built this order carefully. Every stone, every contract, every alliance arranged with deliberate control. He did not tolerate chaos. And the Dunmores had delivered exactly that. Tell them, he said quietly, that I accept their terms. His secretary blinked. Your Grace. The wedding will proceed as scheduled. But the bride has fled. Then I will take the other one. Jack turned from the window, his expression unreadable. Send word that I expect the ceremony tomorrow. No delays. The secretary hesitated, clearly wanting to ask why. Wanting to understand why a Duke of Jack's standing would accept a substitute bride like damaged goods at market. He did not ask. No one questioned the Duke of Vanderbilt twice. When the door closed, Jack returned to the window. His reflection stared back, sharp jaw, dark eyes, a face that had learned not to show softness years ago. They called him brutal. He knew what they said. That he was cold. Merciless. That his first betrothed had chosen a convent over his bed. That servants wept when dismissed from his household. Let them say it. He had been carved by betrayal and loss until there was nothing left but hedges. His father had been weak, destroyed by love, by sentiment, by the inability to control his own heart. Jack had watched the estate nearly crumble under the weight of his father's grief after his mother died. He would not be weak. He had learned early, affection made men vulnerable. Trust was a weapon others used against you. The only safety was in control. So he controlled everything. His business, his household, his reputation, and now, apparently, his humiliation. The Dunmore girl, Clarissa, had been beautiful, accomplished, exactly the sort of ornamental wife a duke was expected to acquire. He had felt nothing for her, which made her perfect. She would grace his table, bear his heirs, and require nothing from him but title and wealth. He had not expected her to run. That stung more than it should have. Not because he wanted her, but because it confirmed what he already knew. No woman would willingly choose him if given the chance. Jack crossed to his desk and poured a measure of brandy he would not drink. His knuckles were white against the glass. The younger sister. He tried to recall her face from the one time they had met, a formal dinner months ago. She had been quiet, seated at the far end of the table. He remembered nothing distinct about her except that she had not competed for attention like her sister. She would resent this arrangement, surely. Would hate him for forcing her into a marriage she never wanted. Would spend their life together in cold silence or bitter resentment. Fine. He had lived in silence before. He could do it again. At least this way, the Dunmores would owe him. Their desperation would bind them more tightly than any alliance. And his reputation, already dark enough, would absorb this scandal without flinching. Let society whisper that he accepted a replacement bride. Let them say he was so fearsome even his betrothed fled. He did not care what they thought. He never had. Jack set down the glass and straightened his cuffs. Tomorrow he would marry a woman who did not choose him. She would stand at that altar out of duty and desperation, just as he would. There would be no affection, no softness, no risk. Exactly as it should be. He returned to his desk and began drafting letters with steady, controlled strokes. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, the Duke of Vanderbilt prepared to add another cold formality to his carefully constructed life. He did not yet know that quiet steadiness could be more dangerous than passion, or that the woman arriving tomorrow would not fear him at all. And that would change everything. The chapel was full of people who had come to witness a scandal disguised as ceremony. Rosalind stood in the anteroom, her sister's wedding gown altered to fit her smaller frame. The lace felt heavy, foreign, like wearing someone else's life. Through the doorway, she could hear the murmur of guests, their voices sharp with curiosity, soft with pity. They had come expecting Clarissa's beauty and charm. Instead, they would get the younger sister. The sensible one. The replacement. Miss Rosalind. The vicar appeared, his expression carefully neutral. It is time. She nodded. Her hands were steady as she lifted the veil. No one had asked if she needed a moment. No one had offered comfort. Her mother had wept during the fitting, but not for Rosalind, for the scandal, for appearances, for everything except the daughter about to walk into a stranger's life. So Rosalind had learned to comfort herself. She stepped into the chapel. Silence fell like a curtain. Every head turned. She felt their stares, assessing, comparing, finding her lacking. The whispers would come later, but she could already hear them in her mind. Poor thing. Not nearly as lovely as her sister. What must the Duke think? The aisle stretched impossibly long, and at the end of it stood Jack Vanderbilt. He did not turn as she approached. His back was rigid, shoulders squared beneath perfectly tailored black. Even from behind, he radiated control, a man who had never slouched, never wavered, never allowed himself a moment of uncertainty. The Duke they feared. Rosalind's heart beat steady and cold. She had expected many things. Terror, perhaps. Resentment. The urge to flee as her sister had. Instead, she felt only a strange, clear calm. She reached the altar. He turned. Their eyes met. She had been prepared for cruelty, for coldness, for a face that matched the rumors, harsh, brutal, carved from stone. What she saw instead unsettled her more. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, sharp jaw, dark eyes that gave away nothing, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. But it was not his features that struck her. It was the absolute emptiness in his expression. No anger. No disappointment. No emotion at all. He looked at her as if she were a contract to be signed. A duty to be fulfilled. She understood in that moment. He did not hate her. He simply did not see her. "Miss Dunmore," he said quietly. His voice was low, controlled. "Shall we proceed?" Not a greeting. A transaction. "Your Grace," she replied, just as evenly. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she did not tremble, but it vanished before she could name it. The vicar began. Rosalind barely heard the words. She was too aware of the man standing beside her, tall, still, radiating a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. His hands, when they took hers for the vows, were warm. That surprised her. She had expected ice. "Do you, Jack Vanderbilt, take this woman?" "I do." No hesitation. No inflection. Simply fact. The vicar turned to her. The chapel seemed to hold its breath. Every eye pressed against her back, waiting for her to falter, to weep, to reveal the desperation that had brought her here. She lifted her chin slightly. "Do you, Rosalind Dunmore, take this man?" "I do." Her voice carried clear and steady through the silence. She felt Jack's fingers tighten fractionally against hers. The vicar continued, but Rosalind was focused on that small pressure, the only sign that the Duke had reacted at all. His thumb rested against her palm. She could feel the faint calluses there. A soldier's hands, she thought. Or a man who worked instead of only commanded. "You may kiss the bride." Jack turned to her fully. His expression remained unreadable, but she saw his jaw tighten. For a moment, she thought he might refuse, might turn away and make their arrangement brutally clear to everyone watching. Instead, he leaned forward with careful precision. His lips brushed hers. Brief. Formal. Cold as a signature on parchment. But when he pulled back, his eyes met hers for a fraction longer than necessary. And in that fraction, she saw something shift. He had expected fear. She had given him none. And that, more than the vows, more than the kiss, more than the ring now circling her finger, had unsettled him. The vicar pronounced them married. Applause rippled through the chapel, polite and hollow. Jack offered his arm. She took it. They walked back down the aisle together, Duke and Duchess, married and bound, two strangers wearing crowns of duty. Outside the chapel, rain had begun to fall. Neither of them spoke. A carriage waited, black and formal as a hearse. He handed her in without meeting her eyes. She arranged her skirts carefully, aware of the space between them on the seat. The door closed. The carriage lurched forward. And Rosalind Dunmore, now Vanderbilt, watched the chapel disappear behind rain-streaked glass, carrying her toward an estate that felt more like exile than home. Beside her, the Duke stared out his own window. Neither spoke. But between them, something had already begun to shift. She had not trembled. And he had noticed. The estate swallowed them whole. Rosalind had glimpsed it through carriage windows during the journey, vast, dark, surrounded by manicured grounds that felt more like fortifications than gardens. Now, standing in the entrance hall, she understood why they called it cold. High ceilings disappeared into shadow. Portrait eyes followed her from the walls. The marble floor reflected nothing but dim candlelight, and the silence pressed against her ears like water. A housekeeper appeared, grey-haired, tight-lipped, her curtsy precise. "Your Grace. Your Grace." She nodded to each of them in turn. "I am Mrs. Blackwood. Your chambers have been prepared." "Chambers?" Rosalind asked quietly. The housekeeper's expression did not change. The Duchess's suite joins the Duke's. Separate rooms, as is customary. Jack had already started up the stairs. He paused, looking back. "Mrs. Blackwood will show you to your rooms. Dinner is at 8. You need not attend tonight if you are fatigued." It was not an invitation. It was dismissal. Before Rosalind could respond, he continued up the stairs and disappeared down a corridor. Mrs. Blackwood cleared her throat softly. "This way, Your Grace." The Duchess's chambers were beautiful in the way a mausoleum was beautiful, elegant, untouched, without warmth. Heavy curtains blocked the fading light. The bed was enormous, draped in deep blue silk. A writing desk sat by the window, bare of everything except an inkwell. "Will you require assistance undressing, Your Grace?" "No, thank you." Mrs. Blackwood hesitated at the door. "If you need anything, I will manage." When the door closed, Rosalind stood alone in the silence. She crossed to the window and pulled back the curtain. The ground stretched dark and formal beneath twilight. Not a single wildflower. Not a single unplanned thing. She had expected many futures at 19. This had not been one of them. A door opened behind her, not the one to the corridor, but another she had not noticed. A connecting door. Jack stood in the doorway, still in his wedding attire though he had removed his coat. His shirt was open at the collar. He looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "I wanted to clarify the arrangement," he said without preamble. Rosalind turned to face him. "I am listening." "You will have your own chambers. Your own space." "I will not." He stopped. His jaw tightened. "You need not fear me in that regard." The words came out stiff, formal, as if he had rehearsed them. She studied him, this man who terrified lords, who had accepted her as replacement without apparent feeling. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in every movement. "I do not fear you," she said quietly. His eyes sharpened. "You should." "Why?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was silent for a long moment. "Because everyone else does. Everyone else does not know you. Neither do you." "No," she agreed. "But I know this. You did not choose this marriage any more than I did. We are both here because of obligation. Because of my sister's actions and your," she paused, searching for the right word, "your pride." Something dangerous flickered in his expression. Pride. You could have refused the substitution. You could have walked away and found another alliance. But that would have looked like weakness, would it not? Like you had been rejected. The silence stretched taut as wire. When he spoke, his voice was very soft. "You presume much, Duchess." "I observe," she replied, just as softly. "It is a habit I developed early." He moved closer, not threatening, but deliberate. She held her ground. "And what do you observe now?" he asked. She met his eyes. "A man who believes control is the same as strength. Who has built walls so high he has forgotten what they were meant to protect." His breath caught. Just barely. But she heard it. "You know nothing about me." "Then tell me." "Why would I?" "Because," she said steadily, "we are bound to each other now. And silence is only another kind of prison." For a moment, she thought he might answer. Might let something slip past his careful guard. Instead, he stepped back. "Sleep well, Duchess. Tomorrow you will meet the household staff. Mrs. Blackwood will instruct you on managing the estate." He moved toward the connecting door. "Your Grace," she said quietly. He paused, not looking back. "I understand this was not your choice either." His shoulders stiffened. Then he closed the door between them without a word. Rosalind stood alone in her beautiful, cold chambers. Outside, full darkness had fallen. Inside, a single candle burned. She had not trembled at the altar. She had not wept in the carriage. She would not break now. But as she prepared for bed in her sister's wedding gown that had been altered to fit someone it was never meant for, she allowed herself one moment of honesty. She was lonely. More lonely than she had ever been. And on the other side of that closed door, she suspected, so was he. Morning arrived cold and grey. Rosalind woke to unfamiliar silence. No birds, no servants bustling in distant corridors, no warmth. Just the vast emptiness of a house holding its breath. She dressed without assistance, choosing a simple day gown. When she opened her chamber door, a maid startled badly enough to nearly drop the breakfast tray she carried. "Your Grace. I was just bringing." "Thank you." Rosalind took the tray gently. "What is your name?" The girl blinked. "Mary, Your Grace." "Thank you, Mary." The maid bobbed a curtsy and fled. Rosalind carried the tray to the small table by the window and ate alone. Below, the ground stretched precise and controlled. She counted the minutes by the clock on the mantel. When an hour had passed with no word, no summons, she decided to explore. The corridors were long and shadowed. Heavy curtains kept out most of the light. Portraits of stern-faced Vanderbilts watched her progress, generations of men who looked like they had never smiled. She passed servants on the stairs. Each one startled. Each one averted their eyes. They were afraid. Not of her, of making noise, of being noticed, of existing too loudly in a house that demanded silence. Rosalind found the library by accident. The door stood ajar. Inside, books lined the walls floor to ceiling, but dust covered the lower shelves. No one had read them in years. She ran her finger along a spine. The dust came away thick. "Those belonged to my mother." She turned. Jack stood in the doorway, dressed formally despite the early hour. His expression was carefully neutral. "I apologize," she said. "I did not mean to intrude." "You are mistress of this house. You cannot intrude." The words were correct, but his tone suggested otherwise. She gestured to the shelves. She read often. Constantly. A brief pause. "She died when I was 12. Rosalind heard what he did not say, that the books had not been touched since. That this room was a tomb, not a library. "May I read them?" He looked surprised. "If you wish." "I do." She pulled a volume free, careful with its aged binding. A house with books should not keep them locked away. Something shifted in his expression, too quick to name. "The household staff will present themselves at 10 in the drawing room," he said abruptly. "Mrs. Blackwood will review your duties." "My duties?" "Managing the household. Overseeing menus, responding to correspondence, entertaining when necessary." He spoke as if reciting from a ledger. "You are the Duchess. The estate requires." "I understand what is required." He studied her for a moment. "Do you?" "I may not have chosen this," she said quietly, "but I am not a child. I know what is expected." A long silence. 10 o'clock, he repeated. Then he left. Rosalind stood alone among his mother's books. She opened the one in her hands, poetry, well worn, with notes in the margins written in fading ink. "Beauty is truth, truth beauty." She closed it carefully and replaced it on the shelf. Then she crossed to the windows and pulled back the curtains. Light flooded in, sudden and bright. Dust motes swirled in the beams. Behind her, the door opened again. "Your Grace." Mrs. Blackwood appeared, looking startled at the open curtains. "I came to escort you to—" "Mrs. Blackwood." Rosalind turned. "Why are all the curtains closed?" The housekeeper hesitated. "His Grace prefers—" "Darkness." "Order, Your Grace. Sunlight fades the fabrics." "And people," Rosalind said softly, "need light." Mrs. Blackwood said nothing, but her expression flickered with something that might have been agreement. "Come," the housekeeper said finally. "The staff is waiting." They gathered in the drawing room, 15 servants, standing in rigid lines. A butler, 2 footmen, maids, kitchen staff, the groundskeeper, all of them silent, tense, waiting to be judged. Rosalind moved down the line slowly. She asked each name, thanked them for their service. noticed the surprise in their faces when she smiled. They had expected the Duke's coldness reflected in his wife. Instead, they found someone who saw them. When she finished, Mrs. Blackwood began reciting the household schedule, meals, calling hours, accounts to be reviewed. Rosalind listened, absorbing the rhythm of a life that felt like performance. "Are there any questions, Your Grace?" "Yes." Rosalind looked at the housekeeper. "Why does no one speak above a whisper?" Mrs. Blackwood's expression tightened. "His Grace prefers a quiet household." "His Grace," said a low voice from the doorway, "is standing right here." Everyone froze. Jack entered, surveying the assembled staff with that same unreadable expression. His eyes moved to Rosalind. "Is there a problem, Duchess?" She held his gaze. "No, Your Grace. I was simply learning the household." "Then I will leave you to it." But before he turned, his gaze swept the room and landed on the curtains she had opened in the library. Light spilled into the corridor beyond. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He said nothing. He simply left. The servants released a collective breath. Mrs. Blackwood cleared her throat. "Will that be all, Your Grace?" "No." Rosalind looked at each of them in turn. "You need not fear me. And you need not whisper. This is a house, not a tomb." Silence met her words. Then, slowly, the youngest maid, Mary, smiled. It was a small thing. A crack in the facade. But Rosalind saw it. And on the other side of the house, in his study with the door closed, Jack Vanderbilt sat at his desk and stared at nothing. The light from the library bothered him. Not because it was wrong, but because it made him realize how long he had lived in darkness. 3 days passed in careful distance. Jack appeared at breakfast but did not speak. He left for estate business before Rosalind finished her tea. He returned for dinner, when he returned at all, and ate in silence before retreating to his study. She did not intrude. But she did not disappear either. On the 4th morning, he found her in the morning room instead of her chambers. Sunlight streamed through windows she had opened. She sat reading one of his mother's books. He paused in the doorway. "I was not aware you planned to use this room." She looked up. "Am I not permitted?" "I did not say that." "Then what are you saying, Your Grace?" He entered slowly, as if approaching something unpredictable. "Meals are served in the dining hall. At appointed hours. The dining hall seats 40 people. We are 2. That is customary. It is inefficient." She returned to her book. "I prefer to eat where there is light." His jaw tightened. She could see him calculating, deciding whether this mattered enough to contest. "There are rules in this household, Duchess." "I am certain there are. They exist for reason." "I am certain they do." She turned a page calmly. "But I am not breaking them. I am simply choosing a different room." Silence stretched between them. "You opened the curtains in the library," he said finally. "I did. I prefer them closed." "Why?" The question seemed to unbalance him. "The sunlight damages the bindings. Your mother's books have survived 12 years of darkness. I suspect they can endure some light." Something flashed in his eyes, anger, perhaps, or pain so old it had calcified into reflex. "Do not," he said quietly, "presume to know what my mother would have wanted." Rosalind set down the book. Met his gaze directly. "I do not presume. But I know this, books left unread in darkness serve no one. Not even her memory." He stood rigid, hands clenched at his sides. For a moment she thought he might shout. Might finally crack and show the brutality everyone whispered about. Instead, his voice dropped lower. "More dangerous. You have been here 4 days. You know nothing of this house or what it requires. Then teach me." "Excuse me. You want me to follow rules I do not understand." You want silence and distance and perfect order. She stood, facing him across the small table. But you will not tell me why. You will not explain what you are protecting. I am not protecting anything. You are protecting everything, she said softly. From me. From yourself. From anyone who might disturb the walls you have built. His breath came faster. You overstep, Duchess. Do I? Or am I simply the first person in years who has not been afraid to speak honestly to you? The silence that followed pressed against her ribs. Then he stepped closer. Not touching, but close enough that she could see the tension in his throat. The careful control beginning to fray. You think you understand me, he said quietly. You think your observations give you insight. I think you are lonely, she replied. And that you have convinced yourself loneliness is strength. His eyes darkened. You know nothing. Then prove me wrong. They stood too close now. She could feel the heat radiating from him. Could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. Stay out of the East Wing, he said abruptly. Why? Because I am asking you to. Is that a rule? Or a request? Does it matter? Yes. She did not look away. Because one I must follow. The other I choose to respect. He exhaled slowly. She watched his hands flex and release at his sides, the only sign that she had unsettled him. A request, he said finally. Quietly. She nodded. Then I will honor it. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or confusion that she had yielded when he expected resistance. He stepped back. Straightened his coat. I have business in the village. I will return for dinner. Will you join me? Or eat alone again? The question stopped him at the door. I do not expect company at meals. I did not ask what you expect. I asked what you will do. He looked back at her. For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. 7 o'clock, he said finally. The dining hall. The morning room, she countered gently. Where there is light. His jaw tightened. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth almost lifted. Not a smile. But close. The morning room, he agreed. When he left, Rosalind sank back into her chair. Her hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear. From something else entirely. She had pushed. He had not broken. And for the first time, he had chosen to meet her halfway. In his study, Jack stood at the window overlooking the grounds. He pressed his palms against the sill and breathed carefully. She had called him lonely. She was right. And that terrified him more than anything. She found the East Wing by following silence. 10 days into her marriage, Rosalind had mapped most of the estate, the library, the gardens, the servants' quarters. But one corridor remained unexplored, marked only by a heavy door that was always closed. She had promised not to enter. But she had not promised not to look. The door was unlocked. That surprised her. If Jack wanted it kept private, surely he would have turned a key. Instead, the handle moved easily beneath her palm. The corridor beyond stretched dark and cold. Dust thick enough to show her footprints. No servants cleaned here. She walked slowly, trailing her fingers along the wall. Doors lined both sides, bedchambers, perhaps, or sitting rooms long abandoned. At the end, light filtered weakly through a curtained window. And beneath it, a portrait. Rosalind stopped. The woman in the painting was beautiful. Dark hair, gentle eyes, a smile that felt genuine rather than performed. She wore blue silk and held a book in her lap. Jack's mother. The resemblance was there in the jaw, the eyes. But where Jack held himself like stone, his mother looked soft. Alive. I asked you not to come here. Rosalind turned. Jack stood at the corridor's entrance, silhouetted against the light from the main house. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. The door was unlocked, she said. That does not make it an invitation. No. but it makes it a choice. She looked back at the portrait. She was lovely. Yes. You have her eyes. His jaw tightened. He moved into the corridor slowly, each step deliberate. Why is this wing closed? Rosalind asked quietly. Because I prefer it that way. That is not an answer. It is the only one you will receive. She studied him, the rigid shoulders, the careful distance he maintained even now. The way his gaze avoided the portrait entirely. You are afraid of her, Rosalind said softly. His eyes snapped to hers. I beg your pardon. Not of her. Of remembering her. She gestured to the corridor. You have locked away everything that reminded you she existed. The books. The rooms. Even her portrait. You know nothing. I know grief. Her voice remained gentle. I know what it means to lose someone and believe that forgetting will hurt less than remembering. My mother died 12 years ago. And you are still running from it. Something dangerous flashed in his expression. He crossed the remaining distance between them in 3 strides. Stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You presume too much, Duchess. Then tell me I am wrong. Silence pressed between them, heavy as the dust in the air. His hand lifted, almost instinctively, as if to grip her arm. He stopped himself. The restraint was louder than anger. You think you understand, he said, voice low. You think observation gives you the right to dissect my choices. I think you have been alone so long you have forgotten what it means to let anyone near. She did not step back. And I think you keep this wing locked because if you opened it, you would have to admit how much you miss her. His breath came faster now. My mother was everything soft in this house. When she died, my father, he stopped. Swallowed hard. He could not function. Could not govern. The estate nearly fell to ruin because he loved her too much to survive losing her. Understanding settled over Rosalind like cold water. So you learned not to love at all. I learned, he said quietly, that affection makes men weak. It makes them human. It destroys them. Only if they let it. She held his gaze. You are not your father, Jack. The use of his name startled them both. He stared at her. His hand had risen again without him realizing, hovering near her cheek but not touching. You cannot carry everything alone, she whispered. I have managed thus far. Managed. Not lived. The words hung in the dusty air between them. Then he stepped back. Dropped his hand. The wall slammed back into place so fast she almost felt the impact. This wing remains closed, he said. His voice had gone cold again. Controlled. Do not enter it again. He turned and walked away. Left her standing alone beneath his mother's gentle painted eyes. Rosalind released a breath she had not known she was holding. Her hands trembled. Not from fear. From the weight of what she had just seen. Beneath the Duke everyone feared was a boy of 12 who had watched love destroy his father. And he had spent 20 years building walls to ensure it never destroyed him. She looked up at the portrait one last time. He thinks closing doors will keep him safe, she said softly to the painted woman. But all it does is keep him alone. Then she left the East Wing. But she did not forget what she had learned there. That night, Jack sat in his study and did not pretend to work. He simply stared at nothing as rain began to fall outside. She had called him by his name. No one had done that in years. And the sound of it, warm, certain, unafraid, had cracked something he had believed was permanent. The dinner party was a necessity, not a pleasure. Lord and Lady Pemberton had been allies of the Vanderbilt family for 2 generations. Declining their invitation would have caused offense Jack could not afford politically. So he accepted, and informed Rosalind with the same emotional inflection he might use to discuss the weather. We attend at 8. The carriage will be ready at 7:30. She had simply nodded. Now, standing in the Pemberton drawing-room surrounded by London's elite, Rosalind understood why Jack had warned her. The whispers followed like smoke. The replacement bride. Poor thing, married to him. I heard the sister fled rather than. Can you imagine? Waking up to that face every morning. Rosalind kept her expression serene. She had learned early that reaction fed gossip. Silence starved it. Jack stood across the room, speaking with Lord Pemberton about trade routes. He had not looked at her since they arrived. Had not introduced her beyond the bare minimum courtesy required. She was an obligation he had brought along. Nothing more. Lady Pemberton approached with a smile that did not reach her eyes. My dear Duchess, how are you finding married life? Well, thank you. It must be quite an adjustment. From country simplicity to, she gestured vaguely. All of this. Rosalind recognized the barb beneath the politeness. I find I adjust quickly when necessary. Yes, I suppose you would have to. Lady Pemberton's smile sharpened. Given the circumstances of your marriage. So very unexpected. Indeed. Though I find the unexpected often proves more interesting than what is planned. Before Lady Pemberton could respond, a voice cut through the conversation, loud enough to be heard by half the room. Tell me, Vanderbilt, how does it feel to have your bride flee into the night? Lord Harcourt. Drunk and smiling with malicious amusement. The room fell silent. Jack turned slowly. His expression did not change. But Rosalind saw his hand tighten almost imperceptibly around his glass. I beg your pardon, Harcourt. Your betrothed ran off with a lieutenant, did she not? Must sting, being rejected for a man with nothing but charm and a uniform. Polite society held its breath. This was the moment, the public acknowledgement of what everyone whispered privately. The humiliation Jack had swallowed when he accepted Rosalind instead. Jack's voice, when he spoke, was perfectly calm. The elder Miss Dunmore made a choice suited to her temperament. I find I prefer the arrangement that followed. Harcourt laughed. Prefer? You took the leftover sister because you had no other option. Admit it, you were desperate not to look the fool. Rosalind felt the eyes of the room turn to her. Measuring. Judging. Waiting to see if she would crumble under the weight of being called leftover. She prepared to respond, to defend herself with the same cool dignity she had used with Lady Pemberton. But Jack moved first. He crossed the room with deliberate calm. Stopped directly in front of Harcourt. When he spoke, his voice carried, clear, precise, final. My wife requires no defense, Harcourt. But I will provide it nonetheless. The room stilled. You may speak carelessly of arrangements and choices. But let me be clear, I am not a man who settles. I do not accept compromises. And the woman I married, he paused, and for the first time that evening, his gaze found Rosalind's across the room. She is not a replacement. She is precisely whom I would choose. The silence that followed was absolute. Rosalind's breath caught. He had defended her. Not out of obligation. Not to save face. But with intention. With certainty. Harcourt's smile faltered. I meant no offense, Vanderbilt. Then you should have spoken more carefully. Jack's tone remained even. Deadly. My wife's name is not to be mentioned with disrespect in any company. Is that understood? Harcourt swallowed and nodded. Jack turned without waiting for further response. Crossed the room to Rosalind. Offered his arm. We are leaving, he said quietly. She took his arm. Felt the tension radiating through him. They left the Pemberton house without farewells. The carriage waited in the cold night air. Jack handed her in, then climbed in after. The door closed. The carriage lurched forward. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Rosalind said softly, You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? He looked at her directly for the first time all evening. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with something she could not name. Because when he spoke of you that way, I felt something I have not permitted myself to feel in years. What? His voice dropped lower. Fury. The words settled between them like a spark. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, then turned to stare out the window. But his hand remained on the seat between them, close enough that if she moved hers just slightly, their fingers would touch. She did not move. Neither did he. But the air between them had changed. He had called her my wife with intention. Not duty. Not obligation. Choice. And they both knew it. She could not sleep. The house settled around her in creaks and whispers, but Rosalind lay awake, replaying Jack's words in the carriage. Fury. He had defended her with a coldness that felt more dangerous than rage. Had called her his wife like he meant it. Like she was not a substitute but a choice. And then he had retreated into silence. She rose, pulled on her dressing gown, and moved to the window. Rain lashed against the glass. Beyond, the grounds disappeared into darkness. A light flickered in the east wing. She stared at it for a long moment, then made a decision. The corridors were dark, cold. She moved quietly, following the faint glow until she reached the door she had been asked not to open. It stood ajar. Inside, candlelight wavered. Jack stood before his mother's portrait, still dressed from the evening, his coat discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He did not turn when she entered. You should be sleeping, he said quietly. So should you. I do not sleep well. Neither do I. She moved closer, stopping a careful distance away. Not tonight. Silence stretched between them. I should not have spoken as I did, he said finally. At the Pembertons. I allowed emotion to. You defended me. I embarrassed you. Drew attention. You protected me, she interrupted softly. There is a difference. He turned then. In the candlelight, his face looked younger, more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. I have spent years building control, he said, ensuring nothing could touch me. And then Harcourt spoke of you that way and he stopped. His hands flexed at his sides. I wanted to destroy him. But you did not. No. I chose words instead. A bitter smile. How civilized of me. It was not civilization. It was restraint. She stepped closer. You could have ignored him. Could have let the insult pass. But you chose to defend me publicly. Why? I told you. Fury. That is not all of it. His jaw tightened. What do you want me to say, Rosalind? The use of her name sent warmth through her chest. The truth. The truth. He laughed, harsh, without humor. The truth is I did not want you. I agreed to this marriage out of pride and spite. I expected resentment. Expected you to hate me for forcing you into this arrangement. He moved closer, tension radiating from him. But you did not hate me. You did not fear me. You simply existed. Calmly. With that damnable steadiness. And that angered you. It unsettled me. His voice dropped. You opened curtains I kept closed. Read books I had locked away. Spoke to me like I was a man instead of a title. He stopped directly in front of her now. And when Harcourt called you leftover, I realized something I had been avoiding for days. What? That I had stopped thinking of you as a replacement. Her breath caught. When? She whispered. The wedding. When you said I do without trembling. His eyes held hers. Everyone else fears me, Rosalind. But you never did. And I do not know what to do with that. The rain hammered against the windows. The candle flickered. She reached up slowly and touched his face, just her fingertips against his jaw. He froze. You are not brutal, she said softly. You are afraid. Of what? Of this. She did not move her hand. Of letting someone see you. Of what might happen if you stopped controlling everything. His hand rose, covered hers against his cheek. His palm was warm, calloused. My father loved my mother so completely that when she died, he could not function, he said hoarsely. He became a ghost. The estate suffered. Everything fell apart because he had given her the power to unmake him. Love is not weakness, Jack. It destroyed him. No. Grief destroyed him. There is a difference. She turned her hand beneath his, lacing their fingers together. And I am not your mother. You are not your father. We are not them. Then what are we? Two people trying to survive an arrangement we did not choose. She paused, and perhaps discovering we might choose it anyway. His eyes searched hers. You are saying you would choose this? Choose me? I am saying I already have. Her voice steadied. Every morning I wake in this house. Every dinner I sit across from you. Every moment I stay instead of leaving, I am choosing you. His breath shuddered out. Why? Because beneath the walls you have built, there is a man worth knowing. She squeezed his hand gently. And I am tired of living in shadows. Yours or anyone else's. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then he lifted their joined hands and pressed them against his chest, over his heart. I do not know how to do this, he admitted. How to let someone close. He nodded. Then let me start. She rose slightly on her toes. And you can simply not pull away. She kissed him. Soft. Brief. A question more than a demand. He stood frozen for one heartbeat. 2. Then his free hand came up to cup the back of her head, and he kissed her back, not gentle now, but desperate. Like a man who had been holding his breath for years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I am terrified, he whispered. Good, she said. So am I. They stood together in the candlelit east wing, surrounded by the ghosts he had locked away, holding each other like lifelines. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something had finally broken open. Everything changed after the kiss. Not dramatically, not with declarations, but in small, quiet ways that mattered more. Jack waited for her at breakfast now. Did not speak much, but his silence felt different. Less like a wall, more like companionship. He asked her opinion about estate matters. Actually listened to her answers. The study door stood open when she passed. Small things. Shifts. But Rosalind felt them like seismic tremors. 2 weeks after the storm, she found him in the garden at dusk. He stood among the roses, the rigid, perfect roses that looked more like soldiers than flowers. They are too controlled, she said, approaching. He turned. Something in his expression had softened. I beg your pardon. Your roses. They are beautiful, but they look strangled. She touched a bloom carefully. Everything grows better with a little wildness. Wildness leads to chaos. Sometimes. But it also leads to life. She looked at him. You cannot control everything, Jack. I have noticed. His voice carried something that might have been humor. You have made that abundantly clear. She smiled. Have I been difficult? You have been. He paused, searching for words. Persistent. Is that a complaint? No. He moved closer. It is an observation. They stood surrounded by roses as twilight deepened. The air smelled of rain and earth. Walk with me, he said quietly. It was not a command. It was an invitation. She took his offered arm. They moved through the gardens in comfortable silence. His hand covered hers where it rested on his sleeve, warm, steady, deliberate. I have been unfair to you, he said finally. How? I married you out of pride. Kept you at distance out of fear. He stopped walking, turned to face her. And now I find I cannot recall what my life was before you walked into it. Her throat tightened. Jack. Let me finish. His hand lifted to her face, cupping her jaw with a gentleness that undid her. You were supposed to be a replacement. A necessity. Something I tolerated because circumstances required it. And now. Now I realize you were never a replacement. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. You were the correction of every mistake I made before I knew you existed. Tears pricked her eyes. I did not expect this. Neither did I. His voice roughened. I prepared for resentment. For cold obligation. I built walls to keep you out. He paused. But you simply opened windows instead. She laughed, soft, slightly broken. You make it sound easy. It was terrifying. He pulled her closer. You still terrify me. Why? Because I care what happens to you. The admission seemed to cost him. Because when you smile, I find myself trying to earn another. Because at night I stand at that damned connecting door and debate whether knocking would make me weak. And your conclusion? That I am already weak. He touched his forehead to hers. You have unmade me, Rosalind. Completely. Good, she whispered. You were too rigidly made to begin with. He kissed her then, not desperate like the first time, but certain. Like a man who had made a decision and would not retreat from it. When they broke apart, he kept her close. I did not choose you at the altar, he said quietly. But I choose you now. Every day. Until there are no days left. She reached up, traced the line of his jaw. Then it is fortunate I choose you as well. They stood together as darkness fell around them. The house behind glowed with warm light, windows she had opened, rooms she had brought back to life. Will you come to my chambers tonight? He asked softly. Is that a request or a command? It is a hope. She smiled. Then yes. His hand found hers. Laced their fingers together. I do not know how to be gentle, he admitted. I have spent so long being. Then we will learn together. She squeezed his hand. I am not fragile, Jack. And neither are you. Not anymore. They walked back to the house hand in hand. The servants noticed. Of course they did. Mrs. Blackwood caught Mary's eye in the corridor. Both smiled. The Duke and Duchess had finally stopped circling each other. And the house, the cold, silent house that had held its breath for years, began to exhale. That night, when Rosalind opened the connecting door, Jack was waiting. Not with distance or formality, but with open arms. And she walked into them without hesitation. Outside, the roses bloomed wild for the first time in years. The household noticed the changes first. The Duke walked differently now, still precise, but without the rigidity that had made him seem carved from stone. He stood beside the Duchess in the morning room, reading over her shoulder. Asked quiet questions about her day. When Mrs. Blackwood entered one morning with tea, she found them laughing. Laughing. She nearly dropped the tray. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood, the Duchess said warmly. The Duke glanced up. For the first time in 20 years of service, Mrs. Blackwood saw him smile. Not much. Just a slight curve at the corner of his mouth. But it was there. Will you require anything else, Your Graces? No, thank you, Jack said. Then, as she turned to leave, Mrs. Blackwood. She paused. Yes, Your Grace. The staff have served this household well. Please ensure they know I appreciate their dedication. The housekeeper blinked. In 2 decades, he had never expressed gratitude unprompted. Of course, Your Grace. When the door closed, Rosalind looked at him with raised eyebrows. What? He asked. You thanked her. I thank people. You have never thanked the staff. Not once in the time I have been here. He shifted, uncomfortable. Perhaps I should have. She reached across the table and took his hand. Perhaps you are learning. His fingers laced with hers automatically now. A gesture that had become natural. You have changed me, he said quietly. No. I simply reminded you who you were beneath all that armor. He studied their joined hands. I do not recognize myself anymore. Is that a complaint? No. He met her eyes. It is a relief. The transformation continued in small ways. He dismissed no servants. He spoke in Parliament with the same precision, but colleagues noted something different. He listened more. Considered before responding. Lord Pemberton mentioned it at White's one evening. Vanderbilt has softened. Marriage will do that, another lord replied. Not to him. We all thought he would remain unchanged regardless of who he wed. Well, she is not who anyone expected. No, Pemberton agreed thoughtfully. But perhaps she is exactly who he needed. At home, Jack found himself seeking Rosalind's presence without conscious thought. He looked for her when he returned from business. Listened for her voice in distant rooms. Felt unsettled when she was not near. One afternoon, he found her in the library, his mother's library, now alive with light and use. She sat curled in a chair, reading. May I join you? He asked. She looked up, smiled. Always. He sat across from her. Pulled a book from the shelf at random. Tried to read but found himself watching her instead. She caught him looking. What? She asked softly. I am trying to remember what this room felt like before you. And I cannot. He set down the book. It is as if you have always been here. As if the house was waiting for you. She rose, crossed to him. Settled on the arm of his chair. Perhaps it was, she said. Perhaps we both were. He pulled her into his lap, an intimacy that still felt new, still made his heart race. I love you, he said. The words fell between them like stones dropped in still water. Rosalind stilled. What? I love you. His voice was steady now. Certain. I did not think I was capable of it. Thought I had buried that part of myself with my mother. But you, he touched her face. You taught me I was wrong. Tears gathered in her eyes. Jack. You do not have to say it back. I do not expect. I love you. She kissed him softly. I have been waiting for you to realize you loved me so I could admit I loved you first. He laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. When? The East Wing. When you told me about your father. When you let me see your fear. She brushed hair from his forehead. That was when I knew. I was terrified that night. I know. That is why I loved you. They sat together in his mother's library as afternoon light streamed through open windows. The house felt warm. Alive. Everything had changed. And neither of them wanted to go back. That evening, they hosted their first dinner party together. Rosalind had suggested it. Jack had agreed. The dining hall, long unused, glowed with candlelight. Guests filled the table. Conversation flowed. Jack sat beside Rosalind instead of across from her. Their hands touched beneath the table. Lady Pemberton, watching from across the room, leaned toward her husband. He has changed. Indeed. She has done the impossible. Made him human. Lord Pemberton smiled. Or perhaps simply reminded him he always was. 1 month into their marriage, Jack woke before dawn and made a decision. He found Rosalind in the morning room, still in her dressing gown, watching sunrise paint the grounds gold. Come with me, he said quietly. She turned. Where? There is something I want to show you. She took his offered hand without question. He led her through corridors she knew, then others she did not. Past the main wings. Past the servants' quarters. To the east wing. Rosalind slowed. Jack. I am inviting you, he said. Properly this time. The door stood open. Morning light flooded through windows he had uncovered. Dust sheets had been removed from furniture. The air no longer felt heavy with grief. His mother's portrait hung where it always had. But now flowers sat beneath it, fresh roses from the garden. You cleaned it, Rosalind whispered. I had help. He gestured to the rooms beyond. Mrs. Blackwood assisted. She said it was time. Rosalind moved slowly through the space. A sitting room. A music room with a pianoforte. A study filled with books. This was hers, Jack said. Her private wing. After she died, my father locked it away. And I kept it locked because opening it meant accepting she was gone. Yes. He stood in the doorway, watching her explore. But you were right. Locking grief away does not diminish it. It only makes everything else smaller. She turned to face him. What changed your mind? You. He crossed to her. You opened every other part of this house. Made it breathe again. And I realized the East Wing was not protecting her memory. It was trapping it. Rosalind touched his face gently. This must have been difficult. It was. But I had help with that as well. He covered her hand with his. You taught me I do not have to carry everything alone. She kissed him softly. I am proud of you. The words hit him like a physical blow. Pride. She was proud of him. No one had said that to him since his mother died. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not giving up on me. For staying even when I gave you every reason to leave. He pulled back to look at her. For teaching me that strength and softness are not opposites. You taught yourself that. I simply reminded you it was possible. They stood together in his mother's sitting room as morning light grew stronger. There is something else, he said. He led her to the study. On the desk sat a wooden box, aged and beautiful. These are letters, Jack said. My mother wrote to me. One for every birthday until I turned 30. She knew she was dying. Wanted to leave words behind. Rosalind's throat tightened. Have you read them? No. I locked them away with everything else. He opened the box. Inside, letters lay carefully arranged, each marked with a year. But I want to now. And I want you with me when I do. Jack. You do not have to say anything. Just be here. She nodded, tears gathering. He opened the first letter with shaking hands. His mother's handwriting flowed across the page, neat, careful, full of love. My dearest Jack, you are 12 today, and I am writing this while you sleep. The doctors tell me I have little time, and I find I must leave you words I wish I could say in person. You are so much like your father, brilliant, strong, achingly kind beneath your careful control. But Jack, my darling boy, do not make the mistake of confusing gentleness with weakness. Love will not destroy you. Closing your heart will. When you find someone who sees past your walls, let them in. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. I love you always. Mother. Jack's hands trembled. Rosalind held him as he read letter after letter. Advice, memories, love poured onto pages across years. In the final letter, marked for his 30th birthday, his mother had written, I hope by now you have learned what I spent my life trying to teach your father, that loving someone completely does not make you weak. It makes you whole. Choose someone who challenges you, who refuses to let you hide, who sees your heart even when you bury it beneath duty. And when you find her, hold on. Jack set down the letter. His face was wet. She would have loved you, he said hoarsely. Rosalind wiped her own tears. I wish I could have known her. She knew you. He touched the letter. Somehow, she knew exactly who I needed. And she told me to hold on. Are you holding on? He pulled her close. With everything I have. They stayed in the East Wing as morning became afternoon, reading letters, sharing memories, opening doors long closed. And when they finally left, Jack did not lock the door behind them. The East Wing would remain open now. A memorial, not a tomb. His mother's rooms filled with light and life once more, just as she would have wanted. Spring arrived with warmth the estate had not felt in years. Rosalind stood in the garden, barefoot in grass still wet with dew. She had slipped out early, wanting to feel the earth beneath her feet, wanting to breathe air that did not taste of stone and formality. The roses had begun to grow wild. She had asked the groundskeeper to stop trimming them so severely. Now they sprawled with abandon, petals scattered on paths, vines reaching beyond their borders. Beautiful chaos. You are going to catch cold. She turned. Jack approached across the lawn, still in shirt-sleeves despite the early hour. His hair was disheveled from sleep. I wanted to see the sunrise, she said. Without shoes. The grass felt too inviting. She smiled. Have you come to scold me about propriety? No. He stopped beside her. I came because I woke and you were not there. The admission held weight. Months ago, he would not have noticed her absence. Would not have come looking. Now he could not help it. I am here, she said softly. I see that. He looked down at her bare feet. You are getting mud on your nightgown. I know. He studied her for a long moment. Then, to her complete surprise, he sat down in the grass, pulled off his boots, set them aside. Jack, what are you? If you are going to be improper, he said, I may as well join you. She laughed, bright and genuine. He smiled at the sound. They sat together in the garden as dawn light strengthened. His hand found hers in the grass between them. I never did this, he said quietly. Sit in gardens. Let myself simply be. He looked at their joined hands. Everything was always structured, controlled. Even as a child, I was taught that dukes do not sit in grass. Do not laugh too loudly. Do not show feeling. And now I find I do not care about those rules anymore. He lifted her hand, pressed it to his lips. You have ruined me for propriety, Rosalind Vanderbilt. Her heart swelled at her full name on his lips. Is that a complaint? It is gratitude. He pulled her closer, until she was tucked against his side. I spent so long being what I thought a duke should be that I forgot to be a man. You reminded me. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You did that yourself. I simply refused to let you hide. Persistent woman. Stubborn man. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the estate wake around them. Servants began their morning tasks. Smoke rose from kitchen chimneys. I want to show you something, Jack said suddenly. He stood, helped her to her feet, and led her deeper into the garden, past the rose beds, past the formal hedges, to a section she had not explored. There, surrounded by wildflowers just beginning to bloom, stood a bench. Newly carved. Beautiful. I had it made, he said. For you. For us. He gestured to an inscription carved into the wood. Not a substitute. A choice. Rosalind's throat tightened. Jack. You said once that you were a replacement. That you stood at the altar in your sister's place. He turned her to face him. But you were never a replacement, Rosalind. You were the answer to a question I did not know I was asking. She reached up, traced the line of his jaw. What question? How to live instead of merely existing. He kissed her then, soft and certain. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. More than I knew I could love anyone. I know. She smiled against his lips. I can feel it in everything you do. The way you wait for me at breakfast. The way you stand closer than you used to. The way you look at me when you think I am not watching. I am not subtle. Not anymore. She kissed him again. And I am grateful for it. They returned to the bench, sat together as morning became day, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting over his heart. The house feels different now, he said. It is alive again. Because of you. Because of us. She corrected gently. You let it breathe, Jack. You opened the doors. You chose to let light in. He pulled her closer. I could not have done it without you. Yes, you could have. But I am glad you did not have to. They sat in their garden, no longer rigid and cold, but wild and growing, and felt the warmth of a life they had built together. Not from obligation. From choice. And that made all the difference. 6 months into their marriage, society noticed what the household already knew. The Duke of Vanderbilt had changed. It began with small observations. He smiled during parliamentary sessions, asked questions instead of issuing pronouncements, left debates early to return home. Unheard of, Lord Harcourt muttered to a colleague. Vanderbilt leaving before a vote is called. He has become domesticated. Or simply human. At White's, men noted how he spoke of his wife, not as property or ornament, but with genuine respect. The Duchess suggested an alternative approach to the trade negotiations, he said one evening. You take advice from your wife, someone asked, half mocking. Jack's expression did not waver. I take advice from intelligent people. She happens to be both my wife and exceptionally intelligent. The table fell silent. No one challenged him. The true test came when the Dunmores requested an audience. Rosalind's parents arrived on a cold afternoon, nervous and formal. Her father had written asking to discuss family matters. Rosalind suspected they needed financial assistance, again. She had not seen them since the wedding. Jack received them in the drawing room. Rosalind sat beside him, not across the room as would be customary, but close. His hand rested near hers on the sofa. Your Grace. Your Graces. Her father bowed stiffly. Thank you for receiving us. You are family, Jack said simply. You are welcome. The words held no warmth, but no hostility either. Rosalind's mother twisted her hands. We wanted to call sooner, but... You were uncertain of your reception, Rosalind finished gently. I understand. We also came to apologize. Her father cleared his throat. For the circumstances of your marriage. For forcing you into. You did not force me, Rosalind interrupted quietly. I made a choice. Perhaps not freely, but I made it nonetheless. Still. We should have, her mother's voice cracked. We should have protected you better. Jack's hand moved to cover Rosalind's. A subtle gesture of support. The past cannot be changed, he said. But I will tell you this, your daughter has brought light to a house that had forgotten warmth. She has challenged me to be better than I believed I could be. And I am grateful every day that circumstances brought her here. Rosalind's mother began to weep softly. Her father stared at Jack with something like wonder. You truly care for her. I love her. Jack said it simply, without hesitation. She is the finest thing in my life. The visit continued with less tension. They spoke of estate matters, of Rosalind's sister, who had written from abroad, happy but struggling financially. When the subject of debts arose, Jack waved it away. Consider them settled. Your Grace, we could not possibly. You are family, he repeated. And your daughter has given me far more than money could measure. He looked at Rosalind. This is the least I can do. When her parents departed, Rosalind walked them to the carriage. Her mother embraced her tightly. He loves you. I know. Truly loves you. I can see it in how he looks at you. How he speaks your name. She pulled back, tears on her cheeks. I am so sorry we put you in this position, but I am so grateful for how it turned out. So am I, Rosalind whispered. That evening, she found Jack in his study. He stood at the window, watching darkness fall. That was kind, she said. What you did today. It was practical. The debts were not large. That is not why you did it. He turned. No. You did it because you knew it mattered to me. Because despite everything, they are my family. She crossed to him. Because you are no longer the man who acts only from logic and control. He pulled her close. I am trying to be the man you deserve. You already are. She touched his face. You have become so gentle, Jack. So open. Sometimes I look at you and cannot believe you are the same man who would not meet my eyes at our wedding. I am not the same man. His arms tightened around her. That man was afraid. This one, he paused. This one knows what he would lose if he stayed afraid. What would you lose? You. He said it simply. I would lose you. And I cannot bear that thought. She kissed him softly. You will never lose me. Promise. I promise. They stood together as night deepened. Outside, the estate glowed with warm light from windows no longer curtained. Inside, a man who had once been called brutal held his wife like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. And perhaps she was. But he was hers as well, anchor and wings both. Exactly as it should be. 1 year after their wedding, Rosalind woke to find Jack's side of the bed empty. She rose, pulled on her robe, and followed instinct to the garden. He stood among the roses, their wild, beautiful roses that bloomed without restraint now. Dawn painted the sky gold and pink. He wore only shirt-sleeves despite the morning chill. You will catch cold, she said, echoing his words from months ago. He turned, smiled. Then you should come keep me warm. She crossed to him. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. 1 year, he said quietly. 1 year, she agreed. I have been thinking about our wedding day. Have you? I remember standing at that altar, refusing to look at you, believing you would be another disappointment, another obligation. His arms tightened. I was so determined not to feel anything. And now? Now I feel everything. He turned her to face him. Now I wake every morning grateful you said I do without trembling. That you stayed when you could have run. That you saw something in me worth saving. I did not save you, Jack. Yes, you did. Just not in the way I expected. He cupped her face gently. You did not rescue me from cruelty or darkness. You simply refused to believe those were all I was. And in refusing to believe it, you made it untrue. Her eyes filled with tears. I love you. I know. He smiled. I can feel it in everything you do. The way you open curtains. The way you speak to servants like they matter. The way you look at me when you think I am not watching. She laughed through her tears. We are both terrible at subtlety now. I prefer it this way. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I prefer everything this way. They stood together as sunlight strengthened. The estate behind them glowed warm, windows open, curtains pulled back, smoke rising cheerfully from chimneys. A house that breathed. A home that lived. I did not marry you for love, Jack said quietly. She stilled. He smiled at her reaction. But I love you because I married you. Because every day with you has taught me what I was missing. What I had denied myself in the name of control. He took both her hands. You were never a substitute, Rosalind. You were always meant to be here. I was just too afraid to see it. And now. Now I see clearly. He pulled her close. You are my wife. My love. My choice. Not because circumstances forced it, but because I would choose you again. And again. And always. She kissed him with everything she felt, joy and love and gratitude for the life they had built from obligation. When they broke apart, he pressed something into her hand. A key. "What is this?" she asked. "The East Wing. Your wing now, if you want it." "I thought," he hesitated, vulnerable still after all this time. "I thought you might want space for yourself. For your books. For whatever you wish." "Jack." Her throat tightened. "You are giving me your mother's wing. She would have wanted you to have it. Would have loved you as I do." He touched her face. "Besides, I find I cannot bear having you too far away. If you take those rooms, I may have to move my study closer." She laughed. "Then I accept. On one condition." "What?" "That we fill it with life. Not lock it away again." "Agreed." They walked back toward the house hand in hand. Servants were beginning their day. Mary waved from a window. Mrs. Blackwood smiled as they passed. Everyone knew. The Duke and Duchess were not just married now. They were devoted. At the door, Jack paused. Turned to look back at the gardens, at the estate that had been his prison for so many years. "It is beautiful," he said quietly. "It always was," Rosalind replied. "You just needed someone to help you see it." "No." He looked at her. "I needed you." They entered together, not as Duke and substitute bride, but as husband and wife who had chosen each other after the choice had already been made. Inside, the house welcomed them with warmth and light. The beast had learned to love. The beauty had learned she was worth choosing. And together, they had built something neither had expected. A home. A life. A love that was earned, not assumed. And that made it worth everything. If this story stayed with you, tell me, what moment changed everything for you? Leave a comment and share what lingered. These stories are meant to be felt together. Lord Whistledown.